Chapter 52. This kind of superficial cultivation was not something that could be done overnight. No matter how calm she wanted to be, when her soft spot was poked, she couldn't help but panic. Jingwan's face was cold. I know my mother's personality the best. She doesn't even dare to kill an ant. So why would she be so ruthless to take a life? In this Luo family's backyard, there are only two people who want to harm her. Either it was that idiot concubine by who directed and acted on her own, or, since you knew in advance, the possibility of the latter person is higher. No matter who it is, she better clean up her tail, otherwise. Why aren't you getting out of here? Are you waiting for me to call someone to beat you out with a broom? Luo Jingying dared to be arrogant in front of Jingwan, but she had never seen her so cold. She was inexplicably afraid and didn't dare to explain anything. She took her people and fled. After she went out, she couldn't help but be even more afraid. Previously, when she came back from the garden, her mother asked her a few questions about why she was unhappy. She told her in detail, but Madame Lu only smiled and told her that she would help her vent her anger soon. She also said that it was better to have a noble daughter. She thought that it must be her mother who was going to make a move, so she almost didn't think about it and excitedly ran to Begonia House. In the end, she didn't get to see a good show. Not only would she be punished when she went back, but more importantly, she might ruin her mother's big plan. Jingwan sat quietly, but Sunny Jia clearly felt that her mood was not right. For the first time, she ignored the wet nurse's opinion and didn't get up to leave because of her signal. The matter had already happened, so leaving like this would hurt people's feelings. Moreover, the reason why that old woman came was obviously because of her. Otherwise, who would do such a strenuous and unrewarding thing? The purpose was self-evident. Little sister Wan. Jingwan looked at her. She didn't want to smile, but she didn't force herself to smile. Sister Jia, I've let you see a joke? Little sister Wan, in fact, this is nothing. Which backyard can be clean? Moreover, I believe you, and I also believe that the madam who can give birth to a woman like you is not a vicious person. Anyone with eyes can see that this matter is caused by a villain. Don't take it to heart. Sister Jia treats me sincerely. Since this matter is out in the open, I naturally won't hide it. We're good sisters, after all. Naturally, we'll be honest with each other. I also believe that Sister Jia won't have a bad opinion of me because of this. I just hope that Sister Jia won't let this matter affect your mood. This matter won't affect me, but your sulky little face is affecting me. Sunny Jia reached out a finger and scratched her nose. Don't worry about this kind of thing. At the very least, there's still your grandmother. To be honest, Sister Jia, no matter what the reason is, I don't care. What I care about is that that little life is gone before it can even take shape. To be honest, I don't like father's concubine's son and daughter, but that's only because of their status, not because of themselves. I can treat them coldly and ignore them as long as they don't provoke me. Under the same roof, I can live peacefully with them, but I don't want to see them lose their lives for no reason. Since the heavens allowed them to come to this world, others shouldn't take their lives away so easily. Sunny Jia was startled. She didn't think that little sister Wan's heart would be so kind and gentle. This way of thinking isn't wrong, but sometimes this will harm yourself and your loved ones. Jingwan smiled faintly. Sister Jia, you're thinking too much. I'm just adhering to the principle of not taking the initiative to hurt or scheme against others. However, if others take the initiative to attack me, I won't be polite either. If I don't teach some people a deep lesson, they'll always think that our second branch is made of mud. Sister Jia, why don't you go back first today? Jingwan said as she moved closer. With Sister Jia here, it's not convenient for me to teach someone a lesson. It's one thing to let you know, and another thing to let you see it with your own eyes. This image is still important. Sun Yijia snorted with laughter. It's impossible for me to see it even if you want to. Even if you're willing, your family won't be willing. All right, I'll go back first. I'll come back another day to play. If you have nothing to do, you should go to Duke Dingwa's Fu to visit me. I'm usually very bored. Otherwise, be careful that I don't run to your house every day. Jingwan nodded in agreement. She had a servant girl copy the prescription for her and then sent her away. Jingwan turned back. She wasn't in a hurry to go to Falling Plum House to take a look. Where's that biddy? Young miss, she's in the woodshed. Wet nurse, follow me. The others don't need to follow me. They knew that their young miss was worried that they would hear something they shouldn't hear. However, they didn't think that she was younger than them. Sometimes, she was like this. As servants, they couldn't disobey her. Outside the woodshed, a rough biddy was guarding. Mama Gong wasn't there. She must have gone to check on concubine Bai. After the door was opened, Jingwan walked in. She didn't care about the dirty and messy place in the eyes of others. Compared to the crying and howling before, the biddy was very quiet at this moment. However, unexpectedly, her body couldn't stop trembling. If it was because of the fear of death, it was understandable. However, from her eyes, Jingwan felt that it was more than that. Did she say anything? She asked the rough biddy guarding the door. Young miss, no. After bringing her here, Mama Gong asked her, but she didn't say a word. Jingwan nodded, not surprised. Now, she still doesn't want to say anything? The biddy raised her head and looked at Jingwan. Her lips moved, and there was hope and hesitation in her eyes. It was obvious that she was struggling in her heart. However, in the end, she remained silent, lowered her head, and curled into a ball. Jingwan left. She was not angry, happy, or sad. But it was this attitude that made the old woman even more afraid. Before, Nanny Gong did not scold her, nor did she order people to beat her. She just asked a few questions casually, and then approached her and said, "You can be considered as an elder of the Luo family, so you probably won't betray your master just for a little money. Since you can splash dirty water on miss in front of outsiders, obviously you don't care about life and death, then you probably also have a foot in Mistress Bai's side. Make the best use of everything. You are not a lonely old woman. If you are really alone, you should be thinking about living a comfortable life. How could you do such a thing in your late years? There is only one possibility left. Someone has captured your relatives to threaten you. Perhaps you also need money for them. It is understandable that you did such a thing. However, it is understandable, but it is unforgivable. No matter how many relatives you have, whether they are in or out of the mansion, you will meet them one by midnight tonight at the latest." The biddy didn't want to believe it, and she didn't want to believe it. However, Mama Gong's attitude was too calm and firm. In addition, the third young lady didn't panic at all. Even if she repeatedly denied it, she became more and more afraid. She was old and it didn't matter if she died, but her only grandson's parents died early, and he was less than 10 years old. The more the biddy thought about it, the more tears fell down. The third young lady had always been kind. Perhaps, the biddy suddenly got up, rushed to the door, and knocked hard on the door. "Young lady, I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. I'll tell you everything. I don't deserve to die. I only beg you to save my poor grandson." However, no one could hear her. It was quiet in the falling plum house. This was the main courtyard of the second branch. Only Jingwan's parents lived here. The concubines and the two concubine-born sisters lived in the small courtyard at the back. Presumably, everyone was there now. "Third young lady, you're here. Madam has something to do and is not here. Come in and have a seat. I'll make you a cup of tea." Madame Zhang's head maidservant, Lu Mei, saw her and quickly came forward. However, she was a little anxious. Why did the third young lady come at this time? Didn't she have an important guest? Jingwan waved her hand. "How's concubine Bai?" Chapter 53. I've already detained her. I'll deal with her later. How's it going over there? The child is gone. Concubine Bai is crying and making a fuss. It seems that it was planned. The madams of the other branches and the old madam were all alarmed. The old madam didn't come and handed the matter over to the old madam. I don't know what's going on now. Knowing that Jingwan already knew, she didn't hide it. I'll go and take a look. Third young lady, the old madam strictly forbade you from knowing about this from the beginning. She didn't want you to know about this, so you shouldn't go. The old madam is with her, and the old madam will handle it impartially. She won't let the old madam suffer. You see, if the third young lady went over and they couldn't stop her, she would be punished by the old madam. She really didn't want the third young lady to see such a troublesome thing. Jingwan paused. Where's my father? Is he not in the house? The second master went out to meet a friend. I've already sent someone to invite him. I don't know when he will be back. Okay, I'll go to grandmother. She had a big mountain to support her. If she went over, no one would say anything and she wouldn't get the maids punished. At this point, even if the maids knew what Jingwan was going to do, they didn't dare to stop her. Madame Luo didn't seem to be surprised by Jingwan's arrival. Continue to protect her. It's because all of you protect her that she only grows older but not wiser. She's already so old, but she's still as innocent and naive as a girl. When you get married in the future, I'll see what she'll do. Can she continue to rely on her husband and her son? Men spend most of their time outside. If someone really catches the opportunity, they'll definitely scheme against her. If 3 or 5 times aren't enough, they'll do it 8 or 10 times. Sooner or later, your father will have a grudge. Without your father's support, whatever Jingbo wants to do will be in vain. So, before I get married, I have to quickly find a daughter-in-law who can help and protect her, Jingwan said with a flattering smile. How could Madame Luo not know what she was thinking? She glanced at her. I'm already worried enough about your marriage. You still want me to find a wife for Jinghua? Do you have the heart to let grandmother work so hard? What a heartless girl. Jingwan saw that her grandmother was angry, so she hurried forward and said, I'm not asking you to look for a candidate. I just hope that you can take a look at the candidate when father and the others decide. Seeing that Madame Luo was still unmoved, Jingwan softened her voice. She called her grandmother coquettishly and gently shook her arm. Her voice was so sweet that Jingwan herself almost had goosebumps. At first, Jingwan could still act coquettishly naturally, but after a long time, she felt like she was about to break down. Madame Luo saw that she was about to die and knew that she had reached her limit. She finally relaxed her expression and said, helplessly, Okay, I promise you. In the beginning, he taught Jingwan how to show weakness at appropriate times. As for later, he seemed to enjoy watching Jingwan act coquettishly. The reason was that it was okay for a short period of time. After a while, Jingwan's little appearance made people very happy. Jingwan breathed a sigh of relief. It was simply killing her. In her previous life, before the family incident, although she wasn't arrogant, she was still proud and was flattered by everyone. After the incident, especially after her grandmother's health collapsed, whether it was the external environment or herself, she would never allow herself to be weak and would never show weakness to others. That kind of pride in her bones, even if it wasn't obvious in this life, was still there. Madame Luo stopped teasing her, but she thought of something else and her face darkened. Sister Jia left because she knew about this? Jingwan nodded and briefly explained what happened. These idiots. There are some things that they never understand. Madame Luo didn't know whether to sigh or be angry. Jingwan hesitated for a moment and asked, Grandmother, how did third aunt marry into our family? Although the Lu family was established as a duke and still had a noble title, with the decline of the Lu family, even if Madame Lu married into the Luo family when Luo Peishan didn't hold the position of minister, it was still a proper marriage. Generally, even the families of 4th or 5th rank officials wouldn't look at them. Jingwan didn't look down on the Lu family, but in this place, where people paid attention to matching social status, it was strange that Madame Lu married into the Luo family. When your grandfather was young, he had some friendship with your third aunt's father and asked your grandfather for help. At that time, your eldest uncle was already married, and your father and mother were also engaged. Your fourth uncle was much younger than Madame Lu, so only your third uncle, who was born of a concubine, was left. The Lu family didn't mind, so your grandfather agreed to this marriage. So that was it. However, this also created a pair of resentful couples. Whether it was Luo Romping or Madame Lu, in fact, they looked down on each other from the bottom of their hearts. Madame Lu looked down on Luo Romping because he was born of a concubine and resented that she became a mother the moment she married into the family. However, she didn't have the courage to break off the marriage. She also knew very well that with her situation at that time, she couldn't find a better husband than Luo Romping. She was proud and arrogant, and Luo Romping, who wasn't valued since childhood, used his arrogance to hide his inferiority. He despised the Lu family from the bottom of his heart, but he didn't dare to disobey Luo Peishan. Thus, for so many years, he lived peacefully and happily. Luo Romping had a lot of beautiful women in his harem, But other than his eldest concubine's son Luo Jingming and his eldest concubine daughter Luo Jingqiang, there were only 2 or 3 children born of concubines. They were completely out of proportion to the huge group of beautiful women in his harem. Moreover, they were all relatively young. If they weren't weak, they were sickly. Many people in the Luo family knew that this was only because Madame Lu had loosened her grip on them in the past few years. As for whether it was because she had discovered her conscience, or because she wanted to accumulate some good karma for her children, or because she thought that their existence would no longer affect her and her children, only she knew. It wasn't that Luo Romping didn't know her methods. Among the 4 brothers, he had the most concubines, but not many of them were pregnant. Even if they were pregnant, most of them would suffer miscarriages or die shortly after birth. Even if he had a pig's brain, he should have known what was going on. However, he didn't care and didn't ask. Even the concubines that he doted on at that time would at most criticize Madame Lu. They didn't scold her for being cruel and merciless, but they said that she didn't manage the household properly. Those who didn't know would think that he valued his wife. In fact, he was just selfish and cold by nature. He only cared about a moment of pleasure and could turn around and pretend that he didn't know anything. Outside, Luo Romping had always been a person who cherished his reputation. He still wanted to have a bright future, a high position, and a generous salary. Naturally, his reputation couldn't be bad. Because Madame Lu was very clear about this, she became more and more unscrupulous. Luo Peishan was naturally not a person who would intervene in his son's backyard. It was just that he inadvertently learned about his 3rd son's absurd behavior. He also had the idea to punish him. However, when he found out that the husband and wife were just snakes and rats in a nest, he was too lazy to ask. As long as they didn't make a scene outside and become a joke, he would let them do whatever they wanted behind closed doors. Madame Luo naturally didn't want to care about concubine Bai's trivial matter. She left it to her eldest daughter-in-law to handle. If she went there, it would show that she didn't trust her eldest daughter-in-law. However, she also thought that Jingwan might come to find her, so she didn't say anything to her eldest daughter-in-law. Moreover, when Jingwan learned that her eldest aunt was handling this matter, she couldn't let her lose face. She also promised Madame Luo that she would just take a look. When they saw Madame Luo arrive, except for Madame Bai, who was lying in bed after the miscarriage, everyone hurriedly greeted her. Seeing Jingwan by her side, even if Madame Zhang was anxious, she couldn't say anything. Madame Bai, who was crying and howling like a shrew and refused to speak properly, automatically shut her mouth when she saw Madame Luo. Madame Luo, please forgive me, this concubine. That's enough. Lie down. Madame Luo interrupted her. Then she looked at Madame Bai. On the day she entered the capital, this woman should have greeted her at the gate, but she didn't have any impression of her. Willow leaf eyebrows, an oval face, and because of the miscarriage, her face was pale and she looked very weak. She was delicate and pitiful. However, Madame Luo's face didn't have the slightest fluctuation of emotion. Chapter 54. Sometimes, Jingwan admired these people who could act at any time and place. She was howling so fiercely, but when she stopped, she didn't seem to be in a sorry state. She was like a weeping beauty. If it was someone who didn't know, even if it was a woman, their heart would soften. However, in the face of her grandmother, who had experienced decades of wind and rain, those tricks were really not enough. Madame Luo walked to the side and sat down. Old lady, what's the situation? Madame Wang knew that Madame Luo didn't avoid Jingwan, so she directly said, Mother, the thing is, Madame Bai's daily food comes from the small kitchen of the Falling Plum House. As soon as she finished speaking, Madame Luo turned her head to look at Jingwan, and Jingwan seemed to sense it and looked back. At that moment, Jingwan read the meaning in Madame Luo's eyes. See, your mother is such an idiot. Jingwan was helpless. Her mother's purpose was actually very simple. She hoped that the pregnant concubine would be able to eat well. After all, without the support of her husband, a concubine would be a concubine. Even if she was pregnant, the amount of food she ate would not be better than that of the official wife. She would eat from the small kitchen, and she would even subsidize the concubine. Madame Zhang used to do this before, but nothing happened. Now it was the same as before. It was not that the people around her didn't remind her, but Madame Zhang was so naive and sweet. She thought that everyone in the world had the same thoughts as her. Not only did she promise that nothing would happen, but she also said that it was not good for the people around her to speculate about others with bad intentions. Jingwan was very busy a few days ago, and the people of the Falling Plum House didn't want to disturb her with this matter. They asked her to persuade Madame Zhang, thinking that it was only a few days, so nothing should happen. In the end, they all regretted it. Today, Madame Bai asked for some desserts. Not long after she ate, her stomach began to hurt. Soon, she saw red and reported it to her younger sister-in-law. Her younger sister-in-law invited a doctor she was familiar with from outside, but by the time the doctor arrived, the child was already gone. Daughter-in-law had someone check the desserts. There was indeed something unclean inside. The person in charge of making the desserts was second sister-in-law's head maidservant, Lame. The person who delivered the desserts was second sister-in-law's second-rank maidservant, Lu Er. Lu Er personally handed the desserts to Bai Shi's maidservant, Kai Ling. The three maidservants all said that during the time the desserts were in their hands, no unrelated person had touched them. The ingredients used for the winter sweet were all ready-made from the Fallen Plum House. Her daughter-in-law had sent people to check the ingredients, and there were no problems. In that case, the problem basically lay with these three people. The Belle was a clever one. She swore that she did not do anything. She was the only one who followed Bai Shi into the Luo family. She was loyal to Bai Shi. She hoped more than anyone that her Yinyang could give birth to a boy or a girl. Lu Er was usually lively, but she was not the least bit careless when it came to doing things. She received the desserts from Lame and handed them to Kai Ling. Along the way, there were basically people who saw her. After she finished her part, she did not say anything more. As for Lame, she was not a child of the Luo family. When she was a few years old, she was bought into the Luo family and followed Madame Zhang. From a little maidservant, she was promoted to Madame Zhang's head maidservant a year ago. She was a little dull and clumsy. Because she was very good at making desserts, although she did not do anything in the kitchen, she often made desserts for Madame Zhang. When she learned that something had happened to Madame Bai, she was so anxious that she cried. She repeatedly said that she did not do it. When Madame Bai slandered Madame Zhang, she also said that the madam was not that kind of person. She could not say a word more. As for the doctor, it was Madame Bai's second-rank maidservant, Zhu Er, who reported it to my younger sister-in-law. My younger sister-in-law said that she only heard that Madame Bai was not feeling well, so she went to invite a doctor from outside as usual and did not bother the doctor in the house. However, Zhu Er said that she had explained Madame Bai's situation very clearly and said that it was very serious. She wanted to make an exception and asked the doctor in the house to take a look. However, my younger sister-in-law said that she was just a concubine, so there was no need to bother the doctor in the house. The ins and outs of the whole thing were basically clear now. It was just a routine. If she investigated carefully, she would definitely find some clues. However, whether she could find the mastermind behind the scenes in the end depended on that person's skills. What was more, Jingwan was curious about the role of the old maid who was locked in the woodshed in her courtyard in this matter. One thing was certain. She ran to her courtyard on the spur of the moment. Mama Gong had already investigated who she had met before she went to Begonia Elegant House. However, in Jingwan's opinion, if this matter was really her third aunt's doing, there might be no result in the end. Jingwan's eyes fell on her third aunt. She lowered her eyebrows and narrowed her eyes. There was no sadness or joy on her face. The expression in her eyes could not be seen clearly. Her whole person was quiet. It must be said that Madame Lu was a person with a sense of propriety. She knew that her grandmother did not like her very much, so she did not go forward to make trouble. In front of others, she was not strong, but she was never weak. In the beginning, the other mistresses of the Luo family's inner court weren't sure if she was in control of the entire situation or if the other yin-yangs were framing each other. However, after a long time, even if they still didn't have any evidence against her, they more or less had an idea. Madame Lu's face was naturally thicker than Luo Jingying's. You could never catch her fault on the surface. You could not see her gaffe unless she deliberately showed it. However, if she was really the same on the surface, then she would not have raised a daughter with Luo Jingying's temperament. In this ancient era, a mother's influence on their children especially their daughters, was too great. If she did not have the memory of her previous life, perhaps she would have become as silly and sweet as Madame Zhang. Because when she was in Qi and Prefecture, Jingwan was puzzled about this point. Taking advantage of the fact that children were not easy to be noticed, and she had a lot of time, she secretly watched Madame Lu for more than half a year. In this way, she discovered Madame Lu's unknown side. At that time, Jingwan was very surprised. If this person lived in a certain circle in her previous life, she would be like a fish in water. She would definitely get an Oscar. Madame Lu always regarded herself as the descendant of the founding duke. She could not see, or was unwilling to see the reality. But she was a very rational person. She never revealed her inner thoughts to others. To sum it up, she was a maidservant, but she had the dream of being a princess. After understanding Madame Lu's thoughts, Jingwan sometimes felt that it was ridiculous. Her third uncle was only a son of a concubine. Even if his grandparents passed away, when they separated, he did not get much. Her third uncle's eyes were high, but his ability was mediocre. Madame Lu saw through him too clearly, so she pinned all her hopes on her children. If she really put all her thoughts on teaching the two children, she may not be unable to get what she wanted in the future. Unfortunately, her mind had long been crooked. She was always scheming, especially when she was the one who suppressed her daughter. She couldn't wait to be torn into pieces. Moreover, Madame Lu had a very strong sense of vanity and jealousy in her bones. If others were doing well, she would be unhappy. Luo Jingying had learned this from her. However, in the entire Luo family's backyard, only her mother was good at scheming. Unexpectedly, her mother was supported by her father. Even if someone splashed dirty water on her father would believe that she was pure and innocent. So, Madame Lu didn't really make a move that many times. Jingwan didn't know what other people thought about this matter, but she felt that it was most likely Third Aunt's doing. She was as ruthless as ever. Who knew how long she had hidden these spies in Falling Plum House? If she dared to expose them, there was at least a 90% chance that she would frame her mother. It was fine if it was a normal matter, but when it came to his children, even if it was her father, he would definitely be unhappy. More importantly, Madame Zhang's image in the hearts of the servants was completely ruined. No matter how good she was in the past, they would all think that she was putting on an act and had a Buddha's mouth but a snake's heart. If it was a scheming person, this situation wouldn't be a big deal because she could suppress it and turn the tables. However, if it was Madame Zhang, her life would probably be difficult. Her purpose was not to kill Madame Zhang, because she knew very well that this was not enough to kill Madame Zhang. She just didn't want Madame Zhang to be free and happy all day, which would make Jingwan unhappy. Jingwan thought about it carefully. If this game was successful, it would really hit the snake at its weak point. Chapter 55. Because everyone had their own opinions, Madame Zhang protected the people in her courtyard and did not allow torture, and Madame Wang could not just hit Madame Bai's people. By the time Madame Luo and Jingwan arrived, the matter had already reached a deadlock. With their arrival, Madame Wang was not displeased. Instead, she seemed to be relieved. She really did not know what to do with someone as muddle-headed as her second sister-in-law. Faced with Madame Luo's question, she hesitated and looked at Madame Zhang. How could Madame Luo not understand? She said expressionlessly, "Find all the relatives of the related people in the house and in front of them. Flog them 10 times. If they still don't tell the truth, their whole family will be punished. If they still don't tell the truth, sell them." No one would have thought that Madame Luo would be so ruthless. "Mother," Madame Zhang hurriedly wanted to plead. "Shut up. You are the one who has the least right to speak now. If it weren't for your stupid and wooden-headed brain, would this have happened? If it weren't for the fact that I still have something to ask you to do, I would have grounded you for 3 years." Madame Luo was really angry. It was one thing for her to be hopelessly stupid, but she also always implicated others. Madame Luo had always been a good mother-in-law and never treated her daughter-in-law harshly. Even if she knew that Madame Lu was a two-faced and vicious woman, she still treated her indifferently and never made things difficult for her. Occasionally, when she encountered some things, she would secretly warn them. In front of so many people, it was definitely the first time that Madame Zhang was so merciless. Madame Zhang also didn't expect it to be like this. She felt wronged and cried, but she didn't dare to say a word. Jingwan stood next to Madame Luo. Seeing her mother like this, she couldn't do anything. After this incident, she hoped that she could learn a little bit, even if it was just a little bit. But even with such a low request, the hope was still slim. Most people only heard that Madame Luo blamed Madame Zhang, but some people also heard the trust in Madame Zhang's words. She clearly didn't believe that this was something that Madame Zhang could do. On the bed, Madame Bai was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She had met an unromantic husband, an innocent and stupid mistress, and a mother-in-law who looked kind but didn't care about concubines. No matter how many methods she had, she couldn't use them. Obviously, it was that idiot who occupied the position of the matriarch who caused her to lose her child. It was such an obvious thing, but no one believed it. She should not have been so careless. She should not have thought that that woman would not have the guts to do anything. The fact was, when a stupid dog bit people, it was even more ruthless. It could even hit you when you were not prepared. She should have listened to the advice of the bell and not eaten the food sent by the falling plum house. The child that she had painstakingly gotten was gone just like that. The relevant people were gathered as quickly as possible. Everyone in the room was moved to the courtyard, including Madame Bai, who struggled to get up. Madame Luo did not comment on this, but Madame Zhang, seeing her pale face, wanted to persuade her. She seemed to have completely forgotten who was the one who said that she, Madame Zhang, was cruel and merciless, not even letting go of the unborn child in her belly. She was not just naive and sweet. In Jingwan's eyes, she was no different from the Virgin Mary. Fortunately, before Jingwan could do anything, Madame Zhang's mammy had already stopped her. Not to mention that Madame Bai had already recognized Madame Zhang as her enemy. Even if she didn't do this, Madame Bai was the matriarch and the other was a concubine. In front of the matriarch, she was like a maid. They were born to be at odds. No matter how well Madame Zhang did and how many good things she gave, Madame Bai would not appreciate it. Now that Madame Bai tried to dissuade her at this time, Madame Bai might think that Madame Bai had ulterior motives and wanted to take this opportunity to get rid of her confidant. Other than Kalin, everyone else more or less had relatives. Even the Wondersuite that was bought from outside had been worshipped as a godmother in the Fu. However, it did not mean that Kalin could escape the disaster. For a servant like her who had unknown origins, as the ruler of the backyard, Madame Wang would naturally find out their origins. Madame Bai was a distant niece of the Luo Rongyan. She was the daughter of a concubine and was not favored. She was given away just like that, and did not have a close maid who had a deep relationship with her. Kalin was also from her so-called uncle's family. From the moment Kalin was sent to Madame Bai's side, their fates were closely linked. Madame Bai's methods were also extraordinary, so she quickly took Kalin as her confidant. Madame Luo originally did not want to intervene, but Madame Zhang's performance made her change her mind. She decided to fiercely tidy up the backyard. If she did not properly knock some people down, would they really think that she was a decoration in the residence? They always made all kinds of trouble from time to time. Originally, Wan was in a good mood because the good thing was about to happen, but someone was not sensible and wanted to ruin it. Madame Luo used a method that she would not use in the past. She directly took Luo Peishan's name card and asked people to go to the Luo Rongyan's house to ask for Kalin. It was just a few servants, so the other party would not refuse to give face. Moreover, Kalin was sent from their Fu. Now that there was a problem in the Luo family, they did not know the specific situation. It was inevitable that they could not help but wonder if something had happened in the Luo family. That was, they did not train them well. As a result, they could only hand over Kalin in fear and trepidation. Although it was a gift from a superior to a subordinate, in fact, there was still the intention to curry favor. Luo Rongyan was not a good person, but his father was not to be underestimated. Jingwan carefully observed the expressions and reactions of the relevant people. She could conclude that Lame was not involved in it. Although she reacted in panic, she was not guilty. Lame was only 2 or 3 years older than Jingwan. She had been in contact with her when she was in Qi and Fu. Living in the capital for 3 years did not change her nature much. As for the other people, in fact, as long as they had enough experience, they basically knew what was going on. It was just that Kalin's reaction was a little strange. Needless to say, Kalin was afraid. but there was a trace of strange excitement mixed in. What was the secret behind it? She believed that she would soon know the answer. However, Madame Zhang's anxiety and Lamei's fear made Jingwan decide to intervene. If there was really no problem with the ingredients in Fallen Plum House, then the desserts must have been swapped. In this way, it was not difficult to prove Lamei's innocence. First aunt, is the desserts left by concubine still here? Yes. Did you think of something? Madame Wang asked kindly. Jingwan nodded. There are a few desserts in Fallen Plum House. When I was in Qian Fu, I made some small changes. The taste is different, especially the desserts made by Sister Lamei. The taste is especially good. I think the desserts that concubine wanted should be one of them, but I'm afraid that ordinary people can't taste them. For those who were used to all kinds of exquisite food, their mouths could more or less be considered as gluttons. It wasn't difficult for them to taste the subtle differences. As far as I know, Sister Lamei habitually makes more desserts. I think it's the same this time. The previous inquiry also proved that she did not do anything unusual in the process of making desserts. I just don't know if there are any other desserts left. Jingwan, a girl, appeared here. Although it was not particularly out of the ordinary, because she was the only girl in the boudoir, it was naturally abrupt. As soon as she spoke, almost everyone's eyes were focused on her. Many people understood the meaning of her words. Fortunately, the desserts left in the Falling Plum House had not been touched yet. Plum blossom cake? When Jingwan saw it, she smiled. This was their second branch's special dessert. Her father especially liked it. No wonder Madame Bai would choose this. Whether it was taken from Fallen Plum House or sent to Madame Bai, they all looked exactly the same. Not to mention the color and style, even the texture was the same. No one doubted that this was made by two people. Thinking back to Jingwan's words, not only did it not clear Lamei's name, but it also made the people who originally trusted Lamei look at her with suspicion. Madame Bai wanted to pounce on her and eat her alive. Jingwan was indifferent. Try it and you'll know. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand. Madame Luo grabbed her hand. You little girl, how can you eat unclean things? The things inside are so powerful that ordinary people can't touch them? Could it be that the person behind the scenes was worried that ordinary methods could not guarantee a 100% success rate, so he used a heavy hand? Chapter 56. It's not that serious, but it's better if you don't touch it. Wang Shi smiled, but there was a different meaning in her smile. Jingwan understood. Just because it was not serious, it did not mean that it was completely useless. Something that was used to deal with children would probably have some influence in this aspect. As an unmarried girl, she naturally had to stay away from it. She did not care about it, but others would. Jingwan pretended that she did not understand and just did what an obedient child should do. Third girl, if you still trust eldest aunt's tongue, let eldest aunt taste it? Jingwan nodded. Wang Shi came from a noble family, so there was naturally no reason for her not to trust. Wang Shi picked up a piece of plum blossom cake, took a small bite, and chewed carefully. Mother, these two plum blossom cakes were indeed made by two people. Although if I did not deliberately taste it carefully, I'm afraid that I would be deceived. This one was made by Lamei. I can be sure that I have tasted her cooking not long ago. Wang Shi gave a positive answer, and there was no problem with the plum blossom cake in Luomei house. In that case, Lamei will be exempted from punishment for the time being. Stand aside. Even if she was innocent, it did not matter if she was beaten a few times. Not to mention a servant, even if it fell on her own children and grandchildren, Madame Luo would not frown. She spoke out of punishment because of Jingwan. She might cut off Luo Peishan's face, but she would not treat Jingwan like this. Mother, thank. Madame Luo cast a sharp look at her. Zhang Shi, who did not learn her lesson, silently shut up. However, she still fearlessly asked someone to bring Lamei over and comforted her with a few words. Although she had long known that Madame Luo was biased to Jingwan, she also let some people see her almost bottomless tolerance, care, and love for her. However, in the future, if her Luo Jingwan does something that endangers the Luo family, I don't believe that you, this damned old woman, will still be so unprincipled to protect her. As the ringtone's relatives hadn't arrived yet, she was left until the end. Because she was the last, the fear in her heart was also the heaviest. The people in front of her were mercilessly beaten. Perhaps they deliberately didn't have their mouths gagged, but the screams lingered in her ears. The bloody scene clearly didn't land on her, but she seemed to feel the bone-piercing pain in advance. Only half of the 10 strikes had passed, and Lu had confessed. She said that she was the one who changed the desserts, and the reason why no one found out along the way was that the food box she used had been tampered with in advance. There was a sandwich inside, and the plum blossom cake with the dirty stuff was made by her personally. She had learned a lot about making desserts from Lame, especially the plum blossom cake. She had secretly put in a lot of effort to reach the level of passing off as genuine. Lu Er's words made everyone in Luo Mei House feel incredulous, especially Madame Zhang, who was hit hard. She liked Lu Er very much. She was delicate and lively, not careless in doing things, and had a kind heart. Why? Madame Zhang almost lost her soul as she asked. This servant just couldn't bear to see concubine by being so arrogant in the past. Madame treated her well wholeheartedly, but she didn't think about returning the favor. It was fine if she didn't think about stepping on Madame's head, especially after she became pregnant. She relied on the piece of flesh in her belly to order around Madame's sisters like little servant girls. This servant was angry and had evil thoughts. Madame, this servant knows that she was wrong. This servant will accept any punishment, but please don't implicate this servant's family. They don't know anything. Lu stubbornly knelt, her eyes begging again. What a loyal and righteous servant. Other than the direct victim, Madame Bai, the other masters would probably like such a servant. Sure enough, not only Madame Zhang, but even Madame Luo's expression softened a little. However, that was all. Even if concubine Bai was only half a master, the child in her belly was a real master. Harming a master's life, no matter how big of a reason one had, one would not be easily let off. Moreover, no one was a fool. They couldn't just believe everything Lu said. Whether it was true or false still needed to be verified. Madame Wang asked Lu some questions in detail, such as how she got those things that normal people in the inner courtyard wouldn't have, who helped her, and how she knew the use of those things. Perhaps because she knew that at this point, it didn't matter whether she said it or not. Lu said everything she knew. She answered whatever was asked. Even if she was repeatedly asked, she still spoke clearly and without any contradictions or omissions. In that case, there seemed to be no need to interrogate anyone else. Madame Wang was also prepared to punish Lu severely. She directly called the slave trader and was prepared to sell her far away as a guilty slave. However, at this moment, Lu Er's family members suddenly rushed forward and knelt in front of Madame Zhang. They kowtowed loudly, Madam, please have mercy and save Lu Er. Lu did such a foolish thing because of you and was branded as a guilty slave. Lu Er's life is over. Ever since Lu came to your side, she has served you with all her heart. Can you bear to see her being trampled on? Madam, I beg you. Madame Zhang was innocent and unaffected. She had a soft and kind personality and easily trusted others. This was well known in the inner courtyard of the Luo family. These people firmly grasped this point and used it. They knew that she would not stand by and do nothing, but they pointed out that if she did not save Lu she would be harsh and ungrateful. Originally, Madame Zhang would have taken the initiative to help, but she was forced to do it for her own reputation. The nature of this was completely different. Moreover, in this way, she had no choice but to save Lu It was like putting her on the fire. Lu who was originally quite calm, finally felt afraid when she learned that she was going to be branded as a guilty slave. She did not dare to ignore Madame Zhang's pleas and expressed her sincerity. She said that even if she did not contribute, she had worked hard. She also repeatedly emphasized the reason why she did wrong. Madame Zhang was already prepared to disregard everything and plead for Lu to Madame Luo, but these people did not give her a chance to speak. She was at a loss and hurriedly told them, "Stop kowtowing and get up." However, these words did not work at all. Until now, she still did not understand her situation. In this matter, no matter what she did, it would not be good for her. Needless to say, what would happen if she did not save Lu But if she did save Lu even if she did not achieve her goal, She would plead for the murderer who killed her husband's child. What was going on? Was her husband's child not worth as much as the life of a servant? Or was it that Madame Zhang wanted to take advantage of the situation and get rid of her dissidents? There would be estrangement between Madame Zhang and the Luo Rongyan. Jingwan looked on coldly and became more and more certain that there was something going on here. It was definitely not as simple as it seemed. From the beginning to the end, the other party's goal was to target Madame Zhang. They were determined to taint her and step on her as much as they could. While everyone's attention was focused on Madame Zhang and Lu Er's family, Jingwan did not let go of other places and tried to find clues. After all, even if Jingwan was very good at judging people, she could not read too much from a person's expression. She was not a professional in this field. However, her efforts paid off. She finally found something else. After carefully sizing up Lu Er again, she thought of another possibility. As for the result, she would know with a try. Enough, all of you. Shut up. The begging stopped abruptly and looked at Jingwan in unison. Jingwan was still the same as when she first arrived. Her expression was dark and indifferent. Jingwan looked inquiringly at Madame Luo and Madame Wang. After getting their nod of agreement, she asked Lu Er calmly, "Do you like plum blossoms?" Lu Er did not understand and nodded honestly. Many people knew that she liked plum blossoms. She liked to embroider many of her personal things with plum blossoms. "I like them. My father likes gold and stone more than flowers and trees. However, he has a special liking for plum blossoms and is also very fond of plum blossoms cakes." "Third miss, don't slander me. There are many people in the world who like plum blossoms. Is second master the only one who likes them?" Lu Er refuted quickly and fiercely. Her attitude was so fierce that it made people speechless. Chapter 57. Lu Er's face turned pale. What she said just now was simply a confession out of guilt and desperation. Lu Er wanted to explain herself, but Jingwan did not give her a chance. She got someone to bring water and went to the falling plum house to get some plum blossom petals that she had collected a few days ago. Lu Er's hands were pressed into the water and washed roughly. The water was a little muddy. It was obvious that her hands were covered with a thick layer of powder. Seeing that her hands were covered with light red dots, Jingwan had an expression that said she had expected it. She then got someone to rub the plum blossom petals on Lu Er's arms, neck, and even face. No. Lu Er struggled with all her might. The petals were like poisonous snakes and ferocious beasts, making her extremely terrified. Everyone else looked at each other. Jingwan continued to look at her coldly. She did not show any other expression because she had expected this. Very soon, red rashes appeared on Lu Er's body. Lu Er howled. "It hurts, it itches." She was probably afraid of hurting her delicate skin, so she did not dare to scratch it. However, in the end, she could not hold herself back and did it. Now that she had started, she could not care less. Streaks of bloody marks appeared on her skin, looking very frightening. If you don't stop her, her face will really be ruined. When that time comes, you won't be able to wait for a good price. Jingwan's words woke Lu Er's family up. They quickly went forward to grab Lu Er. At this point, everyone understood that Lu Er could not touch plum blossom petals. Think about it. If something could cause harm to oneself, then it was natural that such a thing would be hated. However, there was someone who showed extreme love for such a thing. Whether it was true love or fake love, there must be a reason. I didn't expect that there would be more than one person in the Luo family who likes to torture themselves. Jingwan glanced at the Lu family and said calmly. Previously, Luo Jingying had been torturing herself psychologically. Now, Lu Er was torturing herself physically. In fact, Mrs. Lu should be counted as well. Instead of living a good life, she insisted on making things difficult for herself and then wanted to drag others down with her. Mrs. Lu happened to see Jingwan's meaningful glance. Her heart jumped. She always felt that Jingwan could see through her. She had a creepy feeling. However, after thinking about it, she felt that it shouldn't be that bad. Even the old madam only knew a little about her. She was just a little girl. No matter how capable she was, that was all. Thus, she suppressed the uneasiness in her heart. Jingwan didn't need to do anything after that. Madame Zhang's nannies would take care of it. secretly spying on the male master, persecuting the concubine, and framing the mistress. Clearly, she had the heart of a snake and scorpion, yet she dared to boast shamelessly that she was doing it for the mistress. In order to get Madame Zhang out of the picture, naturally, she couldn't give Lu Er a chance to refute. She pointed out some of Lu Er's daily trifles one by one. For example, she liked to embroider plum blossoms on things she used, but she didn't break them. She also said that it bloomed on a branch and everyone saw it. It was better to share it with others than to share it with others. However, these remarks were occasionally heard by the second young master. She also said that some of her words and deeds didn't seem to be important, but when linked together, her intentions were clear. Lu Er couldn't refute it at all. At first, Madame Zhang's nannies only wanted to help Madame Zhang. As she spoke, she became more and more angry. Because she wasn't making things up, it turned out that there were signs so early, but she didn't notice it. She even left such a poisonous snake by the Madame's side. Madame Zhang didn't dare to believe that the final result of the matter would be like this. She thought that although she didn't know the people around her a lot, she could still pat her chest and guarantee that she treated them well. She also never asked them to repay her. Instead, she received kindness with enmity. For a moment, she was disheartened. Her nature for decades couldn't be changed just because she said so. If Madame Zhang really became a qualified mistress of the inner house, she wouldn't be hers anymore. Her happiness, and even her friendship with Luo Rongyan would be completely erased. Jingwan sometimes hoped that her mother could change, but in fact, she never tried to do anything. Even if sometimes her role was reversed with Madame Zhang, she didn't care. She didn't expect Madame Zhang to do anything for her, and she didn't need it. As for Jingwan, deep in her heart, she thought, just let it be like this. It's fine as long as Madame Zhang maintains her nature. She can always find a way to protect her for a lifetime of peace and prosperity. Previously, she had been ignoring Madame Zhang. At this time, she walked forward and said, "Mother, don't think too much. It's fine as long as you have a clear conscience." Madame Zhang's fragile heart was instantly comforted. Although she was still sad about Lu Er's actions, she didn't continue to have a hopeless expression. Her daughter was right. She had a clear conscience. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, straightened her back, and resumed the posture of a pampered noble lady. Without comparison, there was no way to distinguish good from bad. Not only did Madame Zhang not fulfill her duty as a mother, but she was also cared for and sheltered by her own daughter. Thinking about her own daughter, including Madame Wang's married daughter, Madame Wang still had to worry about them. Not to mention Madame Lu, who had a daughter like Luo Jingying. Not only did she plan for her all day long, but she also had to clean up her messes from time to time. How much time could she spend on herself? She didn't expect Lu Er to take care of her in turn. Why was Madame Zhang so lucky? Madame Wang's heart was bitter. Madame Wu also wondered if her daughter would be so considerate in the future. As for Madame Lu, she still looked calm on the surface, but her heart was full of holes from the devil of jealousy. She didn't know when it would be completely corroded, and she would lose her mind and do something even crazier. The matter could be said to be full of twists and turns, but the perpetrator was indeed Lu Er. There was no doubt about this. It was naturally impossible for things to end like this. Jingwan would not allow it. She had to take this opportunity to pull out all the nails in Madame Lu's heart. As for people like Madame Luo and Madame Wang, after being reminded by Jingwan, they thought that there was more to this matter. After all, Lu Er was a little girl who was a bit scheming and inexperienced. She had always been well-behaved and did some small things very secretly. Otherwise, even if Madame Zhang didn't notice it, there was no reason why the people around her didn't notice it. But Lu Er suddenly became ruthless. Perhaps someone said something to her, or perhaps promised her something. Jingwan looked at Madame Luo, and Madame Luo happened to look over as well. When Jingwan saw the other party nod slightly, she already understood that her grandmother wanted to help her investigate to the end. Jingwan gently nodded in response. She naturally appreciated her grandmother's protection. After all, she was a girl in the boudoir. It was one thing to be a bystander, but it was another thing to completely intervene. Some families clearly needed a capable daughter-in-law, but before matchmaking for their children, if they heard that the girl was very capable in the boudoir, then they would not be happy. It was such a contradiction. Jingwan felt that although her marriage was almost settled, it was better not to have a fierce reputation. Jingwan had always thought of herself as a gentle girl. That's right, that was it. Although Lu Er was held down, her face was already scratched. Although the wound was not deep, if she did not take care of it properly, it would leave a very ugly scar. Appearance was really too important for a girl. Moreover, Lu Er's appearance was above average, and she also had her own ambitions. It could be imagined how much she valued her face. Destroying her face was more serious than taking her life. After the initial pain, her heart was filled with the desire to die. However, even if she wanted to die, she could not live anymore. After that, when she looked at Jingwan, her eyes were engraved with deep hatred. From her point of view, it was Jingwan who saw through her and destroyed her face. She had never seen such a vicious person. She opened her mouth and wanted to scold her. However, her family naturally would not let her have her way and hurriedly covered her mouth. Now that things had come to this, her daughter had no value, but she could not implicate her family because of her. Jingwan turned a blind eye to her resentment. Some people were just like that. They would never look for a reason from themselves. If it wasn't for the fact that she was the one who made the first move, even if she had some thoughts that she shouldn't have, no one would care about her. Jingwan knew that she should never underestimate small people. Whether it was in the history of her previous life or the history of this life, people who fell into the hands of small people could be found everywhere. However, people like Lu Er, who had a family and servants, lived in the harem. It was not that she was looking down on her, but even if she was lucky enough to survive after this incident, she would not be able to make any waves. Moreover, Jingwan lowered her head slightly. Her grandmother was a person who did not leave behind any future troubles. Although she had never done anything ruthless in front of her, she knew. As for the female lead's mother, the character setting was like this. If the relatives did not like her, they could just ignore her. In the future, they would write less about her. Also, the relatives expressed that they did not like the inner house fights. Although the main focus of the novel was the inner house fights, in fact, there would not be much inner house fights. The author was not good at writing inner house fights. Just these few people from the Luo family, they would have to be dealt with. Chapter 58. She had just witnessed Madame Luo's ruthlessness and decisiveness, and now she was witnessing her gentleness and tolerance. Madame Luo had someone bring Lu Er in front of her and looked at her condescendingly. Lu Er, who had a fierce expression just now, was now trembling uncontrollably. I'll give you a chance. Tell me everything you've been hiding, and I'll give you a bottle of Yulu ointment. Yulu ointment had a miraculous effect on removing scars. During the reign of the late emperor, it had helped one of the late emperor's favored concubines to remove a terrifying scar, and thus became famous. However, that ointment was very expensive and very rare. It was almost exclusively used by the favored concubines in the palace. Before this, no one knew that Madame Luo had such an ointment, but since she said she had it, no one doubted her. Lu Er revealed a look of pleasant surprise. Madam, are you serious? Are you doubting me? Madame Luo said lightly. No, no. Lu Er hurriedly denied. Then, without thinking too much about it, she was afraid that Madame Luo would go back on her word. Like spilling beans, she rattled off the parts she had been hiding without stopping. She did not think at all about what would happen to the people she had implicated, nor did she think about whether she would have the fortune to enjoy the Yulu ointment even if she obtained it. The only remaining thought in her mind was that her face would not be disfigured, and that she would still be as beautiful as before. Sure enough, Lu Er's thoughts had been known by someone, and then she had been instigated intentionally or unintentionally. In this way, another person had been implicated. In addition to the person who had helped Lu Er before, there were a total of 4 people. The gatekeeper, the front yard, the backyard, and the falling plum house. They were really connected. Were the 3 people from before purely because they had been bribed by Lu Er to help her, or were they instructed by someone to make things convenient for her? No matter what the situation was, she caught them all. Perhaps because she was angry, she did not ask anything and gave them a good beating first. Not to mention that they had only helped a little and did not do anything wrong, but they had brought those dirty things into the backyard. Whether they had known about it or not, it was a huge mistake. All of them were either begging for mercy or yelling that they had been wronged. That miserable and bloody scene made many servants keep quiet out of fear. They only knew that the old madam was a kind person, but they didn't expect that when she was ruthless, she was even more frightening than the first madam they had always respected. They all shrank their necks and didn't dare to breathe loudly. They only silently warned themselves that in the future, they must know their place and don't be blinded by greed. Otherwise, it would be their turn next time. Similarly, they were sold under the name of a guilty slave. As a result, even those who truly didn't know the truth would be able to reveal some of the dark secrets of the inner residence. Aside from the fourth branch, everyone in the third branch was exposed. The second branch was the least exposed, and most of the information came from Concubine Bai. Now, other than Madame Wu and Madame Zhang, who still didn't have any self-awareness, many people's expressions turned ugly. Jingwan glanced at Mrs. Liu. The matter that was exposed had nothing to do with her, but because it involved the concubines of the third branch, she felt ashamed. Oh, sure enough, she was the king of acting. Few people could compare to her. Gong Mama came over with the servant who was detained in the Begonia house. Then, all the women of Kaling's family arrived. The men and the other men of the Luo family's servants were all guarded outside the second gate. Madame Luo ordered people to take the main related personnel away and carefully interrogate them. They had to clearly explain what they knew. If they pointed out other people and there was no discrepancy between their confessions, they could be exempted from being sold. If they were meritorious, they would be rewarded with an additional 10 to 100 taels of silver. The head servant's monthly salary was only 1 tael of silver, so this reward was definitely a huge sum of money. After coercion and temptation, the result quickly became clear. Unexpectedly, the person behind the scenes turned out to be concubine Hua of the third branch, Luo Jingqiang's biological mother. Even Kaling, who was by Madame Bai's side, was bribed by her. It turned out that the reason why Madame Bai acted so quickly was that Kaling added something to the first piece of snack she gave her. The servant girl who passed the message to Madame Zhang was also arranged by her. The servant who went to Jingwan's courtyard was the one who provided Lu with the prescription for those dirty things. She was also the key person to contact both sides. Before Gong Mama brought her here, she told her that her grandson's whereabouts had been found in a surprisingly short time. The reason why Kaling betrayed her master was that she received 100 taels of silver. Her good-for-nothing younger brother, who was always causing trouble, went to gambling dens and brothels at a young age. He owed a lot of debt and was found. Her parents didn't want to be kicked out of the house by the main family, so they made a scene and used filial piety to force their daughters. They said that they would buy out their relationship with them for 100 taels of silver and never look for them again in the future. Kaling knew that her master, Madame Bai, couldn't help her. Concubine Hua was brought over, and Luo Jingqiang, who insisted on following, was also brought over. Concubine Hua didn't have any makeup on. There were obvious wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but her facial features were small and delicate. She was a beauty. Looking at it carefully, Luo Jingqiang looked more like her father. Concubine Hua was neither sad nor happy. Her eyes were exceptionally calm, as if she had already expected this situation. She quietly knelt in front of Madame Luo and calmly admitted all her sins. Because she was angry with the main mother, Madame Lu, for embezzling her daughter's dowry, she had the idea of revenge. Because she accidentally heard Madame Lu complaining about Madame Zhang's good fortune, she used this as an excuse to plot against the second branch and try to frame Madame Lu. However, her ability was limited and she didn't succeed. Madame Luo, this concubine, knows that her sins are serious, but second young lady really didn't know anything. Please, for the sake of her being your granddaughter, let her marry in a dignified manner. Don't let this sinner affect her. Concubine Hua looked at Madame Luo with tears in the corners of her eyes. The depths of her eyes were filled with sadness and pleading. She was sincere, no longer as calm as before. Naturally, Jingwan had known about Concubine Hua for a long time. In the early years, Concubine Hua had fought with the Lu matriarch many times, but she was able to survive until now and raise Luo Jingqiang. It could be seen that she was not a simple person. However, as she gradually lived in seclusion, Her sharp edges were mostly erased, and she became transparent. Moreover, she was a good mother. At the same time, Madame Lu also hurriedly knelt down and apologized, saying that she didn't really want to embezzle Luo Jingqiang's dowry. It was just because she was angry with her father. She didn't want to cause such a tragedy. Madame Luo fixed her eyes on the two of them. For a moment, the scene was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting for Madame Luo's final decision. Luo Jingqiang covered her mouth with a handkerchief and didn't dare to cry out. She knew a lot of things, but she couldn't say it or do it. Otherwise, her life with her concubine would be even more difficult. From now on, concubine Hua will be grounded until second young lady gets married. Then, she will move to Zhuangzi and never return. Third son's wife didn't discipline her properly, so she will be fined a year's salary. In addition, your third branch will add 30% of second young lady's dowry in addition to the public money. I will personally look at the list of dowry. Madam Bai had a miscarriage and injured her body. She will recuperate in her courtyard. Don't come out if you have nothing to do. As for the others, it's up to you whether to reward or punish them. She walked straight away. Madame Luo didn't even call Jingwan. It could be seen that she was really angry. Jingwan thought about it and still didn't follow. First, Madame Bai lost her child. Then, she was betrayed. Now, she was grounded in disguise. In a fit of anger, she really fainted. Madame Lu knelt on the ground for a long time and didn't move. People who didn't know would think that she was distressed by the extra money. But in Jingwan's view, she was not only distressed, but also reflecting on herself. She was reflecting that she didn't do it carefully enough. She went for wool and came home shorn. Although she considered that she might be found out and found a scapegoat, in the end, she was indeed picked out perfectly. She also removed the thorn in concubine Hua's side for many years. However, she didn't achieve her original goal. Instead, she was warned by Madame Luo and lost a lot of money. Jingwan was very curious. How did Madame Lu's heart become so twisted? But she didn't show it on her face at all. Madame Wang always had her own set of principles. Rewards and punishments were clear, but she also considered what Madame Luo said. Rewards were rewards, punishments were punishments. The two sides didn't offset each other. Those who should be beaten were beaten, those who should be sold were sold, and those who should be sold were sold, and those who were 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 sold were not kept. It could be said that she was merciless and benevolent. Jingwan asked Madame Zhang's servants to take her back, indicating that they should comfort her. In fact, Jingwan was not very worried about her. Her mother was easy to be sad, but sometimes she was open-minded. A maidservant wouldn't really hurt her. After a while, she would be fine. To put it nicely, she was open-minded. To put it bluntly, she was heartless. Chapter 59. When Mrs. Lu turned around, there was a kind smile on her face. What's the matter, third girl? Jingwan was a little embarrassed. She pursed her lips and smiled. Speaking of which, there's a small matter that I'm sorry about. When that old woman shouted about concubine Bai's matter to me, not only did she dirty the ears of Ding General Manor's sister's son, but she also dirted the ears of fourth sister. After hearing such a dirty thing, fourth sister's heart must be uneasy. Third aunt, I'm afraid you'll have to spend some time to persuade her. Mrs. Lu's eyes darkened. Suspect her? Warn her? Remind her? If you don't say it, I'm afraid I'll really be kept in the dark. It's also my fault. I spoil your fourth sister too much. I don't let her know anything. If she can be half as smart as you, I should pray to Buddha. Her tone was very helpless. Was she mocking her for knowing all kinds of dirty things at such a young age? Fourth sister is lucky. Even if she doesn't know anything for the rest of her life, it doesn't matter. Third aunt will always worry about her. I can't do it. If I don't know anything, won't I be bullied to death? As a mother, worrying about her daughter for the rest of her life, if it wasn't cursing her daughter to have a short life, what was it? No matter how good Mrs. Lu was at pretending, at this time, she stopped smiling. Third girl, are you saying that your mother is not good? My mother is naturally good, but grandmother said that she is lucky. She doesn't know anything. There's no other way. As children, we are self-reliant. Maybe fourth sister will be like my mother in the future. That's really enviable. With Luo Jingying's temper, even if she met a good husband, she couldn't live as carefree as Mrs. Zhang. It was said that if she was unhappy, she asked for it. Looking for trouble all day long. No matter how deep the feelings were, they would disappear. Mrs. Lu still wanted to say something, but Jingwan didn't want to be long-winded with her. I think third aunt still has things to do. After all, second sister will be married soon. Third aunt still has to add to her dowry. It's not easy work. Niece is going to see grandmother, so I'll take my leave first. Jingwan bent her knees, turned to the road of the main courtyard, and walked away. Concubine Hua and Luo Jingqiang were silent, but the servants who followed them lowered their heads. They couldn't wait to find a hole to hide and disappear in front of Mrs. Lu. Mrs. Lu was silent for a moment, but in the end, she didn't say anything. When she returned to the territory of the third branch, Mrs. Lu was about to call Concubine Hua and Luo Jingqiang. But Concubine Hua spoke first. Foreign, the second young lady's dowry hasn't been embroidered yet. The Buddhist scriptures that Foreign ordered this servant to copy for the old Foreign haven't been finished. This concubine is now a sinner. I'll take my leave first. Facing them in her own territory, Mrs. Lu naturally won't pretend anymore. Looking at the mother and daughter in front of her, her eyes were full of poison. But now, Concubine Hua helped her take the blame and got what she wanted. She was not afraid at all. She slightly raised her head and looked at Mrs. Lu. After Mrs. Lu married into the Luo family, except for the first 1 or 2 years, no one in the third branch dared to provoke her like this. However, she really can't touch the mother and daughter now. If Concubine Hua was desperate at this time, even if she didn't admit it, she would be greatly affected. I hope that the second young lady will have a good life in her husband's family in the future and won't need her family. Regarding Mrs. Lu's threat, Concubine Hua didn't comment. Master Luo was healthy and had more than 1 or 2 years of life. As long as her grandfather was still alive, Chang Er's husband's family would treat her well. Besides, even if her daughter was not good in learning, she was definitely much better than Luo Jingying in dealing with people. She believed that her daughter would have a good life, and no matter how bad it was better than living in the hands of Mrs. Lu. Thank you for your kind words. Mrs. Lu coldly sent them away. Concubine Hua. After returning, Luo Jingqiang couldn't stop crying in front of Mrs. Hua. Silly girl, why are you crying? Mrs. Hua hugged Luo Jingqiang and gently patted her back. It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, Concubine Hua wouldn't be threatened by her and wouldn't be driven out of the Luo family. It's nothing. It's not like you don't know her character. She can't wait to get rid of those who are in her way. Luo Jingqiang leaned on her shoulder and cried for a long time before slowly stopping. Concubine Hua, wait for me. I will find a way to bring you back. You're talking nonsense again. Your grandmother said that I will never come back. How can I come back? In fact, old madam is not punishing me, but helping me. Although she doesn't like Concubine Hua, it doesn't mean that she is unreasonable. I'm afraid she's very clear about who's behind today's incident. I don't have that much ability, nor do I have that much money to gather so many people in the Luo family's backyard. Actually, old madam isn't the only one who knows about this. That Zhuangzi is the Luo family's Zhuangzi, not hers. She can't even reach out and criticize me. In this way, I will be the only master there. Isn't it better than being tortured by her in the backyard? Moreover, old madam will personally ask about your dowry, which is something that Concubine Hua didn't dare to think about. Now, Concubine Hua is just waiting for you to get married, and Concubine Hua has no other ideas. Concubine Hua, you, just live a good life in the future. Don't think too much. Also, if possible, get closer to your third sister. It will only be good for you. But she knows that old madam is unhappy, but she still deliberately used my dowry to stab old madam. Didn't she think that old madam might vent her anger on us? It was impossible to say that she didn't feel resentful when she heard Jingwan's words before. That's because your third sister knows that old madam won't do anything to us. Your third sister has been steady since she was a child. She has always had a sense of propriety. Even if it's a servant, she won't be tired. Except for fourth young lady, she has never said harsh words to anyone. Your third sister was taught by old madam. Old Madam can be said to be the wisest woman Concubine Hua has ever seen. Concubine Hua, I know what to do. Concubine Hua knows that Chang'er is a well-behaved girl. Don't learn from Luo Jingying. You're so arrogant that you can't see the reality. You're smart, but you're often the victim of your own cleverness. Mrs. Lu asked someone to call Luo Jingying to the front. She didn't say anything and just looked at her with a gloomy face. When Luo Jingying came back from Begonia House, she was very nervous. Now that she saw her mother like this, she was scared. Her usual arrogant, flamboyant, elegant, and confident girl was completely gone. She became a bit timid. However, the more Luo Jingwan behaved like this, the angrier the Lu matriarch got. Even if she was in the wrong, she should not lower her head. She should maintain her composure, but look at her now. She was so timid that she could not even compare to those country bumpkins who came from a small place and had never seen the world. She thought about Luo Jingwan, who was calm in the face and did everything appropriately. Even if her words were sarcastic, she could not find fault with them on the surface. That was the Lu matriarch's ideal daughter. Then, she thought about the losses she had suffered today, and the anger she had suppressed could no longer be controlled. Luo Jingying staggered and almost fell to the ground. She felt a burning pain on her face. In addition, she sprained her neck. But she didn't feel the pain. She was stunned. Her appearance didn't make Mrs. Lu feel sorry for her. Instead, her eyes began to become bloodshot. She looked like a female beast that was about to lose her mind. The mama next to Mrs. Lu saw that something was wrong. She quickly asked someone to take Luo Jingying out and hug Mrs. Lu. Luo Jingying, who was outside, heard the commotion inside. She slowly came back to her senses and covered her red and swollen face. She had never been hit since she was a child, let alone her mother, who treated her like a treasure. Even if she felt that her mother's mood was not right, she didn't know how to react. In addition to pain, she felt wronged. She felt very wronged. There was also an unspeakable resentment. She didn't know who this resentment was directed at. The room gradually quieted down. Mrs. Lu didn't call Luo Jingying to come in. Instead, she asked a maidservant to come out and tell her to go back to her courtyard and reflect on her mistakes. There was no time limit. Even though Luo Jingying came back to her senses, she was still a little absent-minded. Her mind was in a mess, and she needed to calm down. Therefore, she didn't say anything and obediently went back. Chapter 60. Jingwan went to the main courtyard. Regarding this matter, she did not mention a word to Madame Luo. Concubine Bai, on the other hand, could be said to be the most unlucky and suffered the most. Originally, she hoped that Luo Rongyan would come back to see her and comfort her gently and considerately. She also thought about how to use this opportunity to win his pity. Unfortunately, no matter how much she thought about it, it was in vain. Luo Rongyan did not come back until the evening. He was drunk and was directly sent to Falling Plum House. When the accident happened, it was unknown whether the servant who went to find him reported it to him or not. After Madame Bai heard this, she was so angry that she burst into tears. The things in the room were completely smashed, and the servants around her were all angered by her. They directly threw things at them. Being smashed was considered light, but the closer they were to her, the more serious the injury. Because of the ringtone incident, she felt that everyone was playing tricks behind her back. She cursed and scolded crazily. Concubine Ping, who was in the same courtyard, did not make a sound and pretended not to hear anything. Concubine Ji could not bear it. Although her two daughters also lived alone in a courtyard, they were separated from their courtyard by only one wall. With Madame Bai making such a ruckus, it was difficult for the two sisters to pretend not to hear. Concubine Ji was very angry. If her two daughters were led astray, she would tear Madame Bai alive. However, Madame Bai was now a lunatic. If she went to the door now, she did not know what would happen. She could only swallow her anger. She turned and went to her two daughters. Similar situations like this would happen from time to time in the backyard of many noble houses in the capital. The real lively place was the backyard of the third branch. Madame Lu finally recovered a little. Before she could completely calm down, a servant reported that the third master had returned and brought a woman, a very beautiful woman. Madame Lu had long been accustomed to this kind of thing. She did not care much at first. However, what happened next made her anger rise again. That woman did not come to see her immediately. Luo Romping arranged a courtyard for her alone. If that was all, it would be fine. Luo Romping sent his own people to serve that woman. In the past, the women who entered the backyard of the third branch were all arranged by her. If Luo Romping cared, at most, he would say a few words. But this time, he clearly showed that he treated that woman differently. He was protecting that woman. This was an unprecedented threat. Mrs. Lu cheered herself up. She wanted to see that woman. She wanted to see what kind of beauty she was. She wanted to see Luo Romping, a man who valued power more than anything else, no longer cared about his reputation and wanted to tear his face with her. Madame Lu took a large group of people to kill. The small courtyard was originally well decorated. The servants were busy going in and out. When they saw Madame Lu, many people could not help but tremble. Those who were closer to her had to bite the bullet and salute her. Those who were far away saw that the situation was not good and directly took a detour. The first room to be cleaned up was the outer room of the bedroom. Under the warm candlelight, Luo Romping was holding a woman gently and carefully. Although that woman was still some distance away from being able to cause the downfall of a country, she was indeed a first-class beauty, gentle, coquettish, and lovable. Looking at Luo Romping, her eyes were full of deep affection and admiration. It seemed that he was her everything. Without him, she could not live alone. The deep affection between the two of them instantly pierced Mrs. Lu's heart. Before she got married, although Madame Lu did not like Luo Romping, when things were settled, she also imagined that her husband would treat her wholeheartedly, protect her, and pamper her. Unfortunately, when he found out that his Tongfang was pregnant, he stubbornly refused to let that woman have an abortion. On the second day of her marriage, he wanted her to promote that woman to a concubine. All of her beautiful fantasies were instantly shattered. Luo Romping was the same as her. He was dissatisfied with this marriage. From the beginning, the two of them treated each other with respect. But because each of them had their own desires, they only maintained the superficial relationship between husband and wife. Between them, there was not even a moment of tenderness. You brought someone back. Why didn't you tell this concubine? Now, you have to personally arrange it. Isn't this concubine's fault? Seeing the two of them whispering sweet nothings to each other, Madame Lu put on a fake smile and said, that woman seemed to be startled by Madame Lu's sudden words. She suddenly raised her head and then hurriedly got up. This concubine greets Madame. Madame Lu's mouth twitched. Just as she was about to speak, Luo Romping leisurely raised his head and swept a glance at her. His eyes were obviously cold. Be careful. Don't hurt the child in your belly. Madame is a virtuous and magnanimous woman. She will definitely not pay attention to etiquette at this juncture. Listen to what he was saying. Was she really virtuous, or just pretending to be magnanimous? Didn't he know Luo Romping? Didn't she hear that it was a sarcastic warning? She didn't say anything or do anything, but he was already protecting her. And this woman was pregnant. At that moment, Madame Lu was so angry that her blood almost rushed to her heart. At the same time, she felt a chill run from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. Madame Lu thought that she knew Luo Romping's character very well. It was impossible for him to fall in love with a woman. But now, reality slapped her in the face. It wasn't that this man didn't know how to fall in love with a woman, but he hadn't met that woman yet. Although this woman was hypocritical, pretentious, and foxy in her eyes, a man who fell in love with a woman was unreasonable. It was easy for him to spoil his concubine and neglect his wife, even if she didn't know how long his love would last. Madame Lu felt an unprecedented fear. She wasn't sure how far Luo Romping would go for this woman. She was able to gain a foothold in the Luo family and do whatever she wanted in the third branch because of Luo Romping's indifference. Although she disdained and was unwilling to accept it, she had to admit that if a woman didn't have a strong family, she still had to rely on her husband's support. But when this man not only didn't support her, but also helped another woman, even if she had 1,000 abilities and 10,000 means, it was useless. Compromise? Should she put down her pride and compete with these vixens for his favor and beg him to lower his curtain? She wanted to be strong for half of her life, but she couldn't do it. especially when she didn't have a good impression of this man. She wanted to dominate him because he was her legal wife. Even if she didn't want him, no one else could touch him. She wanted to dominate him for the sake of her children's future. That woman gently pushed Luo Romping's hand away and smiled embarrassedly. Foreign is virtuous, but this lowly concubine can't be arrogant because of your favor. She looked at Madame Lu. She looked like a weak willow branch in the wind, but she still respectfully bowed. This lowly concubine originally wanted to serve tea with Foreign, but if I go now, I'm afraid that I will disturb Foreign's rest. I didn't want Foreign to go personally. This lowly concubine is really guilty. I hope Foreign can forgive me. The corner of Madame Lu's mouth twitched. She felt like she had met her match, but this kind of opponent made her completely unhappy. This woman was not easy to deal with. With Luo Romping's help, it was very difficult to trample her to death and get rid of the bastard in her belly that may threaten her son. Look at Mimi. I know that he loves Mimi dearly. Serving tea is just like that. It doesn't matter if you do it or not. Who can say anything about the person in Ye's heart? Your body is heavy now, so the most important thing is to take care of yourself. If you need anything, just tell me. It was natural for a concubine to serve tea with the head wife. If she didn't go through this procedure, she wouldn't be recognized by the head wife. Even if she understood the current situation, Madame Lu's resentment was too heavy today. She couldn't help but speak with sarcasm. Luo Romping looked at Madame Lu's eyes coldly. He was about to open his mouth, but that woman quietly pulled his sleeve. Mimi is new here, so I naturally have to trouble Jejia a bit. Jejia, please don't dislike Mimi for being troublesome. She obediently changed the way she addressed Madame Lu. Chapter 61. Madame Lu's nails almost dug into her flesh. The third branch didn't have much money, so she had to live a frugal life. Luo Romping was like most men who spent money recklessly. Now, he was going to spend his money recklessly on a woman. Good, very good. And this woman really couldn't be underestimated. The first time they fought, she was defeated. Madame Lu had never been defeated like this in her life. She must not fall into her hands. Luo Romping was so ruthless, so Madame Lu didn't want to lower herself. She stopped smiling and said with a cold face, "Whatever you say, it's naturally what it is. But, Wang Yang, it's better to change this name. No matter what character it is, it will clash with the third daughter's name. If mother knows, she will not be happy. This concubine will take my leave." Luo Romping's face changed. He dismissed the servants and took the woman's hand. "In the future, this prince will call you Huan Yang, okay?" In fact, it had nothing to do with Jingwan, but Madame Lu was right. Madame Luo would care. Even if he was unhappy, he had to change it. "It's just a name. You can call me whatever you want." Huan Yang leaned on his shoulder. "To be able to receive your sincerity, this concubine would be willing to die immediately. Don't talk nonsense. We, and our children, have a long life in the future. This prince has already told you that this relationship with Madame Lu is just a matter of face. If she does anything to you, you don't have to tolerate her. She is a person who cares about her face. She won't reveal it herself. So, you don't have to look at her face and live carefully. Madame is the wife, and this concubine is the concubine. Even if Madame does something, it's natural. It's not good to make a scene. As the saying goes, paper can't wrap fire. If someone knows, it will be bad for your reputation. This concubine doesn't want to see. Moreover, it's this concubine and Madame who stole you. It's understandable that Madame is unhappy. So, this concubine won't have a conflict with Madame. But, you won't let yourself suffer. So, you can rest assured. You, don't talk about snatching. I'm yours." Huan Yang's gentleness and thoughtfulness made Luo Romping feel very comfortable. Lady Huan smiled tenderly and sweetly called out, "Master." "By the way, Master, Madame mentioned third young lady just now, second brother's legitimate daughter. The old Madame likes her very much. Don't get close to her. She is influenced by the old Madame and doesn't like concubines. If you make her unhappy, even I can't protect you," Luo Romping said. Luo Romping was not afraid of Jingwan. In his opinion, she was a girl who would get married sooner or later. Even if she suppressed his daughter, he didn't think much of it. The relationship between the third branch and the second branch had never been good. No matter whether she married well or not, it had little to do with him. In this regard, Luo Romping was very clear. As for his legitimate daughter, she was always at loggerheads with her. He had said it once or twice, but later, he was too lazy to say it again. However, his concubine was different. If something happened, the old madam could kill her with a word. So, the best choice was to stay far away from her. Lady Huan's eyes flashed in a place that Luo Romping couldn't see. This concubine knows. Let's not talk about how angry Mrs. Lu was when she went back. Anyway, the Luo family basically knew that Luo Romping brought someone back and was pregnant. After all, there were many people present. If the third branch could put spies in other people's courtyards, naturally, there were spies in their courtyard. Gong Mama was very clear about these twists and turns. She often listened to 30% of it. Even if she didn't eavesdrop in person, she could think about 70% of it. In this way, Jingwan could know more details than others. Jingwan lay on the soft couch and let the maidservant massage her. Although the technique was not as good as Gong Mama's, it was not bad. Gong Mama's foot was injured, but she still wandered around her during the day. Although she was sure that it was much better, Jingwan still didn't want her to continue to be tired. She didn't want to go back to rest, so she let her sit aside and watch. Hearing Gong Mama's soft voice, Jingwan, who was originally sleepy, woke up a little. She said suspiciously, "Third aunt bullied our second branch like this? I was still thinking about how to repay her. I didn't expect that someone would give me a pillow just as I was about to doze off. It's really timely, and it's the most unlikely person. I think it's a coincidence. That woman was probably raised by Third Master outside for a long time. She just found out that she was pregnant today, so she took this opportunity to ask Third Master to bring her back. After all, she was born of a concubine, and her reputation was even worse. According to how much Third Master cares about that woman, it's not difficult to achieve the purpose of entering the Luo family." Gong Mama said, "Well, it's probably really a coincidence. If it was done by someone, they would have schemed against Third Uncle and the Third Branch long ago. Third Uncle is not worthy of being schemed against by outsiders. In our own family, Third Uncle can't threaten Eldest Uncle, so Eldest Uncle naturally won't waste such effort. And my father really doesn't put Third Uncle in his eyes. For the time being, let's wait and see. If the Third Branch is lively enough, then we'll just watch. If it's not lively enough, then we can add firewood," Jingwan said, and her voice gradually lowered, as if she was about to fall asleep. Gong Mama's expression was unfathomable. Yes, Luo Romping is not worthy of being schemed against by outsiders, but that person can't bear to see you being bullied. If someone bullies you, you don't need to do anything. He will help you get back 100 times or 1,000 times. Knowing that you don't get along well with the Third Branch, he has already started to scheme before you came to the capital. It's really not a coincidence that Luo Romping didn't bring that woman back at any other time, but today. After all, he can't make Madame Lu so angry at any other time. Li Hongyuan casually flipped through the things he got from his so-called third brother and fourth brother. If these things were thrown out, it would definitely be enough to make them suffer. However, it was far from enough to directly overthrow them. However, no matter how useful these things were, Li Hongyuan was not interested. After flipping through them, he threw them aside. Eunuch Mu poured him a cup of tea and then stood aside with his head lowered like a wooden stake. Wan and Chun Jingmin's engagement is basically set? Li Hongyuan, who seemed to be thinking and lost in thought for a moment, asked. His tone was indifferent and unusually calm, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. However, in Eunuch Mu's view, this was the most abnormal. Miss Luo was going to be engaged to someone else. His master should be gloomy and thinking of ways to kill Qin Jingmin. The calmer he was, the more terrifying it was. Eunuch Mu couldn't help but reach out to wipe the sweat on his forehead. His master knew everything about Miss Luo's big matter. Even so, Eunuch Mu didn't dare to disagree. But would his answer make his master immediately furious and directly wring his head off? "Master, it should be like this. Sun Yilin sent away Zi to Wan. Li Hongyuan continued to ask. "Master, yes." Eunuch Mu's back began to sweat. Who would save him? Sun Yilin's status is barely enough. Chen Jingmin's is really too low. For this imperial examination, let them know. As long as his standard is passable, he will at least be the third. Yes. Master, what do you want to do? Have you given up on Miss Luo? Otherwise, why did you not trample on the man who was about to become her fiancé and even put in so much effort to help him? Sometimes, the three people in the first place were personally appointed by the emperor. It was really difficult to influence the emperor's decision. It would be best if Chen Jingmin happened to be favored by the emperor. But now that you have said something, we can't just wait. For insurance, we have to find a way to let Chen Jingmin make his presence known in front of the emperor in advance. It was easy to say, but too difficult to do. It was true that a word from the master was enough to make the subordinates run out of legs. Since Sun Yilin has already entered the imperial court as an official, how can he still have time to go to the flower market and neglect his proper duties? Aren't you the one who neglects his proper duties the most, master? If you want to find trouble for others, but don't have time to contact Miss Luo, just say so. If Chen Jingmin is not at the Chen residence, then he is at the Luo residence. Is he preparing to become a bookworm? Young Master Chen has been in the capital for a few months, but the number of times he has been to the Luo residence can be counted on one hand. Although he doesn't participate in literary gatherings or social gatherings every few days, he also doesn't blindly read books. Today is the first time he has seen Miss Luo in the Luo residence. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.